there's not a shortage of people that want to do the work. There's also not a shortage of people with a piece of paper that says that they're qualified to do the work.
I agree with that.
What I think the major challenge to the industry is there's not enough businesses capable of supporting staff. If there were more businesses capable of supporting staff, then there would be more people looking for the job rather than being forced down. You will have to be self-employed.
Hiring the right tradespeople is the number one headache for most business owners. In this episode, I chat to Cathy and Tommy to find out how they hired the right people with the right skills for the right price. I wanted to find out how they attract and keep the best talent, and we discussed interview tips and company culture. We also talked about whether there is a skilled trade shortage in the UK. We know business owners are busy, so we've separated the full interview into chapters. If you hover over the time bar, you can skip to the section you want to learn more about. The podcast is sponsored by Payaka, software that helps you sell more, organise your team, and save hours of time. As business owners, the guests have a lot of experience running large teams, so I hope you get something from the conversation and avoid some of the common mistakes people can make. Let's get into it. So, employing tradespeople for the first time, you've started a business. Mm-hmm. How do you go about that? Like, where do you get started?
With my first employee, it was an apprentice. So I spoke to the local college and they were really helpful in sort of guiding me through the process of what I had to do. When I employed my first qualified electrician, that was a much bigger sort of financial commitment and jump in the deep end. And I would say I probably didn't really fully understand the process until I'd employed her for probably 6 months and realised how much it costs in like employers' contributions and employers' national insurance contributions and van finances and upkeep of another person's van, tools, etc. So I think it depends what stage you're looking to employ. I think colleges can be really good in putting structure in places to help employers with apprentices, but when it actually comes to growing a skilled team of electricians that are already qualified or trained, you're sort of on your own a bit there. There's loads of stuff on .gov, but a lot of it, I think, especially the HR side of things, it's good idea to do your research, I'd say.
From my side of things, we've trained up, I did count this up recently, I think 14 people, either via apprentices, 16, 18-year-old apprentices coming via the college, but the vast majority of them were ACS people, career changers, a lot of people call them. Clearly,
just explain ACS.
ACS, I can't tell you what it stands for. Okay, it's the accreditation. Yeah. Okay, it's the accreditation to create the skill set, the quick skill set to come into the heating industry. So it's not MVQ plumbing, it's not traditional plumbing. It's how can we get people qualified quickly to fill this skills gap that kind of came up in the early 2000s. I think that's its history. I guess in electrical world, you've got the domestic, haven't you?
So they did a domestic installer scheme for a bit, but it's...
Is that no longer there? No?
No, so when I did it, I did the domestic installer scheme, which initially is a 5-week course, and then you can, if you've got the relevant experience on top of that college course, you can register with NIC as a domestic installer and start doing your own small domestic jobs. However, they've changed the requirement to register with the domestic installer scheme now and made it more. It used to be, I'd say, probably... like a specific scheme for people who came through that route, whereas now I'd say it's much more, if you only work on domestic properties and you only have that sort of experience, that's what you would register with. If you're doing a lot more commercial stuff, you're not registered with that, but you register with approved contractor, because they used to give all companies, if they got approved contractor, also a domestic installer. But what they've done now, which I only found out about last year in my NIC annual review, is that you've got to prove that you're doing domestic work and have your Part P qualifications for building control to be on the domestic install scheme as well. And you do also have to have your full MVQ level 3 now for that, which is the full electrical qualification. I did that after I basically followed on from my domestic installer with those courses, which took a lot longer, but it meant that I could get out there doing work to begin with because I'd got the relevant experience. But yeah, there isn't, wouldn't say there's a quick route in now.
That's interesting. That's very interesting for the heating industry that, we still have an option. They did change the rules on that, actually. They did make it a 6-month course. But 6 months sounds a lot quicker than the electrical route.
Yeah. You used to be able to register on the domestic installer team, like I say, but here the NIC guy told me, and I've noticed that the colleges now that traditionally you would have gone to for the short courses, they've got a structure in place on their website where that domestic installer scheme is simply a starting point of the bigger picture. And I'm not sure really what you could actually go do with that domestic installer now. Like, you might be able to go do domestic jobs that don't require Part P notifications. So then you wouldn't need to be registered with a governing body, I'm not sure. But, or maybe you could get employed somewhere where they're wanting somebody who's, but I wouldn't, labouring, basically. Yeah. But I wouldn't, like where I was with me, because at the time, you were able to set up as a domestic installer of an IC, in line with what the scheme, with what the qualification sort of gave you. But they're not, the industry sort of frowned upon it a bit and moved away from it. Which I think is a shame, because if you can get the relevant experience, it is a good way in. But I think the problem with it was that people weren't getting the relevant experience with it, but the colleges can't give them the experience because they've only got a workshop. They can only give them what they've got, and so it was getting that experience with it. I was really lucky that I managed to, but...
And you both mentioned like apprenticeships, and I know it's something that if you go online, like a lot of people are like complaining about it not working for them. Like, what do you put in place to ensure it works for you, and like, have you had those sort of bad experiences?
For us, I can think of in the heating business, we had 5 apprentices. Only 2 of them made it through with us. One of them left of his own accord during the lockdown period, which, you know, I wished him luck. I kind of give him heads up during the first lockdown. Look, if another opportunity comes up, perhaps you might want to consider that. He did choose to take another route, but I kind of found with young people, you can't judge them. You cannot figure them out. While, you know, their interview skills, their on paper work experience, it doesn't exist. You can try to interview them and try to figure out what their mindset is, but they're either lying or they're a closed book. So someone who we interviewed, me and the manager at the time, I left the interview and told my wife, I'm not too sure about that kid. He don't talk. He's quiet. What's he going to be like in a customer's house when he's so scared? He turned out to be the best heating engineer that we ever trained up. You can't judge it by and then people that really, really flew the interview and came across as a model young person, looks you in the eyes when they're talking to you, give them a bag of tools and they don't know where to start. So in my experience, it was more of a case of trial and error. But kind of understand that, you know, some will make it through and some won't. Is that kind of how you found them?
We've had a couple who've sent over applications or emails asking about apprenticeships, and they've caught my eye, and I've thought, they sound, really switched on just from the way they've worded stuff. So we've brought them in on work experience or, paid sort of casual work up until the next apprenticeship year, especially if they've been at an age where they can do that, or it's been the time of year where we've got a few months where we can get them in, and then you can get a bit more of a feel for the reliability, the work ethic. I found though that even then still I've had really good impressions of some of them. I've not worked with them personally, but some of the team have, and then I've worked with them one day and they were on the phone all day, and I'm like, what you doing? Or they're not, like, they've made a mess and not tidied it up. And when you say, how come you've chased out all over that carpet and not used the dust sheet or cleaned it up? They've said, nobody told you to tidy up after you, things like that. So it's, I think, like you said, it's definitely trial and error. And if you can spend time with them before you commit to employing them, the more you get to know people, the more they relax, the more that you see what their true colours are. And then obviously the more so you can make an informed decision, and they as well then also get the opportunity to see how they get on with you, how they get on with your team, if they really want to do the job. It is hard because sometimes you don't have that opportunity to do that, and also if they're already in another job, you can't just leave there with a job to come work for you on a trial for 2 weeks or whatever. And I think it definitely sometimes does take months for them to really come out of their shell. Like you say, they might be really quiet and shy, but they actually prove to be somebody who's really competent and capable.
I see a lot of people on the Facebook groups complaining about apprentices and saying, you know, my second year apprentice has done this, my first year apprentice has done that, my third year apprentice is going to be qualified at this point, across Facebook groups, it kind of looks like it's a bit of a risk for small businesses to make that investment of time and money into a young person that might not make the grade, or worse still, they qualify and then they leave the company, and they've pinned all their thoughts of growing their business around, when the apprentice gets qualified, I'm going to be able to do this, and then the now qualified engineer leaves the business. So, you know, it's a tough one. But for me, I believe in it. I believe in training up young people, because even if they leave your business, they come back round at some point. They go off and work for a bigger company that can offer them X, Y, and Z. At some point, they might go self-employed. At some point, they start to look for, well, I'd rather work for a smaller company again. In any case, what I'd like to say is, you know, focus on building your network. You know, it's the team that you're employing, but it's also the network of people that you've trained up that do the work to your standard, because they will come around. Because ultimately, you know, we want to be in business, don't we, for however long, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So we've really got to be thinking beyond, you know, this time next year I'm going to have an extra engineer, and start to think about, in 5 years' time, how many people would we have trained up, and therefore what's my network like, what's my choice of people to offer a job to.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big fear. My husband, who's a plasterer, would never take anyone on when I first met him who was young, because he just thought if he trained them, they'd leave and go do it themselves, because that's what he'd done. So that was his default position. So he'd have a labourer who was usually like a mature person who's been doing it years and has never either learnt to drive or never had the sort of motivation to go do it themselves. And he's actually got a lad now who works for him he trained. He was I think he was in his 20s when he started with him, and he just happened to do some work at his house at the time. You know, he had loads of work on. They said, oh, you know, can I have that job that you've got going? And he still works for him, and he's like his best employee. He's so good, and he's learnt quickly, and he's really loyal as well. Like, customers will say, oh, can I have your number to ring you next time? And he'll say, oh, no, we don't do that. Or, you know, and like, I think Ollie just constantly worries that he would just go off and set up on his own. But you know, you can't have that mentality all the time, otherwise you'll never grow a team. You've got to take a risk, haven't you? And sometimes they do leave. I've had an apprentice who's been with me 3 years and then left before even qualifying and gone to another company to qualify. But equally, I've had apprentices come to me in their third year and transfer to us to qualify. Yeah. So it's one of them. You can't, you know, if you try and look after your employees, try to have a good relationship with them, you know, the hope is that they will stay with you. But if they do leave, you can't take it personally. You've just got to understand it's just part and parcel. You can employ qualified electricians or qualified gas engineers and they can still leave. You can't make them stay anymore, but you know, at least they could then potentially have an apprentice.
The subby could quit on the morning. On the same morning could turn around and leave you in the lurch forever.
Yeah, but like you've just got to remember, if somebody's leaving your company, somebody else is probably looking to leave another company. So it's just one of them. It's nice to keep a steady team, but it is a team isn't a set thing that you just go and get and keep forever. A team is something that I personally have found is ever changing. Something you've constantly got to adapt to.
A couple of really interesting points you made there, like that stood out to me, was just like how you were talking about like that scenario of like worrying, like whether you take someone on and then you take on that risk that they stay with you, that you pay for them to get trained up, and then they just leave, and it's just like, well, it's just a risk you've got to take if you want to grow the team. And then like to kind of mitigate that risk as well, as long as you're looking after your employees and you're building good relationships with them, you kind of mitigate that risk. If they're going to leave, like people have their own ambitions, right?
Yeah, and it's not always because you've not treated them well, but you know, it's just because, like you said, they've got their own ambitions. They might, like we do mainly domestic work someone might train with us and think, actually, I really want to do commercial
You
work.
want to get trained up on. I've seen that. Somebody left to go to the nation's biggest company. He took a pretty low job there simply because he just wanted more training. He wanted more and more training. Yeah, and he got it. And he spent 3-4 years with them, and he's recently popped up self-employed. But then what's he doing? He's come back, speaking to our company, because that's where he started. He started with us. We built that relationship and that trust. He's gone off and become a better engineer, but now we can help our business out. So yeah, it's the risk of anything, but this comes back to what I think we said on a previous podcast, that some people are just not cut out to be bosses, to have employees, which is fine. It's fine not to grow the team if that's not what you want to do.
Yeah, and if you're looking to grow a business of any kind, you can't let risks paralyze you, right? You've got to jump.
That's it. That's it. Yeah.
And Cathy, you've got quite a big team now. Like, how did you go about deciding to hire the next employee? Like,
Initially it was because we were busy and I needed the help, and then it became people contacting us, and now it's kind of if someone gets in touch that sounds like they'll be the right fit and we could make changes to accommodate them, we'll get them in on trial and see how they go. I don't like, if there's a bit of a wait for people to get booked in, I don't start recruiting. I just think, well, we'll see, if somebody pops up that's going to be good for the team. We do regularly get emails, probably twice a week, saying I'm looking to retrain, or I'm looking for an apprenticeship, or I'm working at this other company and I've seen your vans and I'd like to know what it's like to work for your company. And we try to get them in on a trial, so we can meet them. I can work with them for the day, see what they're capable of, check that they're credible, what they say they can do, and also see, like you say, with your company, they might have learned one thing, so they might be at another company that's really good at training on, testing, or really good at training on install, but not so great on training on testing. And I find a lot of companies do kind of focus on either getting them really trained up to install and then somebody else will go do the testing, or they probably don't do a lot of install because it's more maintenance, but they've got to be able to test. And so then you can get them in and see, can they do what they say they can do, and what am I going to have to teach them to get them to be able to work the way we work, and then go from there, really. I think it's very difficult to say, right, I'm going to employ somebody. Right now I'm going to look for somebody, and then the right person to come along. I think that's got to be, you've got to be lucky.
Yeah, and I guess that, like, your investment in building a brand, and it's probably the same for you, I imagine, Tommy, that you've built a brand, you're putting yourself out there on social media, that not only helps you get new leads in, but it also builds the brand for any prospective employees that know that you're there, and so they're coming to you anyway. And
you'll build relationships with the college, build relationships with the training centre, and when someone suitable does pop up, that's often where you'll get the course leader give you a call, drop you an email, and say, hey, I've got someone in your area, do you mind having a look? Yeah.
Do you ever, is there ever a route that you would go down with, like, a recruiter, or would you ever pay anyone to do that, or like?
I looked into this once, and what put me off was the fee. We did interview a couple of people, and I'll be honest, what came back wasn't really that impressive. And then there was the risk, well, hang on, if we pay the recruitment company £3,500, I think, back in the day, what's where's the risk here that this person might not cut the mustard 2 months into it? Again, it comes back to risk. But I always felt, well, get the young person in, get the person in that is changing their career, and you can look at them for a good solid amount of time before you've got to make a substantial financial commitment to them. But every business is different. Some people need that that finished article experience, qualified person with 10-20 years experience behind them to hit the road. It depends. Every business is different.
And when you're taking on people, and we've touched on it a little bit, but is there any tips that you can give people in terms of that interviewing process, things that you can ask or things that you're looking for specifically? Maybe Cathy, do you want to start?
I'd just say the more time you can spend with them before committing for both of you is probably better, because it might be that, like I used to assume any female who's decided she wants to be a electrician has definitely got her head screwed on, because if it's a girl and she wants to be an electrician, it's like, come on. And quite often they just don't know what's actually realistically involved, or something's influenced them to think that, but it's not necessarily something that should have, or so I'd say it's quite, especially as well younger, parents can sometimes influence younger male and females at sort of apprenticeship, that typical apprenticeship age. Like the parents might be pushing them towards it, so I think the more time you can spend with them, the better it is going to be, because then you get to know them best. And like you say, everyone relaxes once they get to know people, don't they? It's like when you get a new boyfriend or girlfriend, super nice, and
sometimes too relaxed, feet under the table.
So just the longest trials possible.
I would add to consider trying to figure out how you can figure out the mindset of the person that you're taking on. Yes, in certain instances we need the skill set, we need the qualification, but let's be honest, the vast majority of people that are going to be watching this show are small business owners with less than 10 staff. So the fact that we have less than staff, and most of them are going to have 2 to 5 team members, the fact that it's such a small team, it means that the people within the team have to be adaptable. They have to be multi-skilled, because they can't just be that engineer, they can't just be that apprentice, they can't just be that admin person that does this defined set of tasks. Because we're small business owners, then we're trying to spin many different plates, and it either all comes back onto the business owner that you're the only person spinning the plates and the rest of the team has their defined roles, or why not share the plates out amongst your team? So, in order to do that correctly at the hiring stage, what can we do to try to figure out how adaptable are they? Not just that's the qualification. They've done 5 years experience at this place. They've done 3 years experience at that place. I can see the paperwork that they can do it. But how adaptable are they? Can they use a computer? That's a big one. Clearly, it's not so much of an issue for when we're talking to apprentices. But if we are going to be hiring somebody in the 40s, for instance, or even 50s, right? Can use a computer.
We've got all the stuff.
Can you knock
here,
together
the
an
iPads
email?
And stuff. Yeah, definitely.
Can you use the iPad? Yeah. Why? Because the business is going to be reliant on this. So if the only thing that you can do is fill out a form, use the tools and fill out a form, well, you can't do the rest of this. You'll never be able to go out and do the surveys. You'll never be able to go out and do the quotes. And if that's it, we are always going to need someone above you to fulfill that role. That's where I'm at. So there's a lot more benefits, I think, with finding the younger dogs. That old saying of you can't teach an old dog new tricks, but it's finding them new dogs that you can teach the tricks to do the stuff that's going to stop you from spinning so many plates.
Yeah. And we touched on this a little bit, but clearly it's going to be really important to figure out what the total cost of hiring employees is, because it's not just their salary. Like you said, there's a lot of stuff on top, a lot of like legal responsibilities, taxes, pensions, all that kind of stuff. How do you, especially when you start, like how did you get help with that, or did you just do it all yourselves, or like what would you recommend?
I think we employ all our staff, so I found it out more of once I had to do it. When I was paying it, that's when I found out, sort of thing. I think if I'd have maybe had a meeting with my accountant and gone through it a bit more, it probably would have been more helpful. Business planning is such a good idea, but it's just one of them things that's actually making a plan is one of the things I always find it's all well said to do it, but to actually sit down and do it, I think it's definitely worth actually spending the time doing it. Because once you've got the bill through the door and you've got to pay the pension contributions or the national insurance contributions, and once you get over so many staff, it changes to a high percentage and stuff like that. You know, once you've got the bill, it's a bit too late to then start realising that actually you're not charging these people out at enough money to cover what you're actually costing. So
so having a good, reliable accountant is
and actually asking them
just
about it.
Come back to the accountant every time. You know, the importance of having a decent accountant on your team that you can reach out to, not after booking an appointment, but actually say, hey, I've got an important question. Can you help me out?
We've got a great accountant, but I just always ring her to actually communicate with them, I think.
Brilliant.
I think also when you're starting out, you're sort of setting those salaries, you can't necessarily offer the highest salary. Do you think about like what other benefits you can offer to be more attractive to the people you really want?
I'd say with that one, realising what are benefits, because I think when I first started like growing the team, I really wanted to make it an amazing team that paid best in industry, that had the best setup in industry. You know, I wanted to make it so they all had like a list of benefits that like I would have seen as benefits, but actually like there's a lot of things that other people appreciate that you might not realise that actually don't cost you anything, i.e. being a small business, that personal touch. A lot of people go to big companies, come back around and realise the difference between working for a big company and a small company. You don't need to spend any money to do that. You don't need to do anything, you know, differently. It's just appreciating that yourself, that is a benefit.
Yeah. There's something Tommy mentioned earlier as well that I think is a benefit when you're talking about spinning all the plates, sharing the plates out. Yeah. When you're doing that, you're giving people more experience and like you're giving them like a broader skill set. So if they do get to some point in life where their personal ambitions take hold and they want to go and set up, they've got some insight and some experience into that. So I see that as a massive benefit.
I think a lot of the people that spent a lot of time with my business has exactly got that. You know, the ones that were there the longest time for me were the ones most likely to go out and be successful at their own business, because we shared the responsibility. We're sending them out doing the surveys, getting them writing up the quotes. You know, it wasn't just you're the engineer, you've got the bag of tools and the van, that's only your job. It was like, no, right from an early point, we're showing them through. This is how you're going to go from being an apprentice to being an engineer to being a manager to, you know, at some point, if you want to leave and run your own business, you've got everything there. And they have. A number of them have.
I don't think you realise how much people appreciate responsibility as well. Like when in my law job, I was so desperate to progress and have my own files, but I did want to get onto my money, but it was the responsibility that was important to me. But I don't necessarily always think like that when I'm dealing. Well, I do more now, but originally I didn't really think about that as always as a benefit. I always kind of thought, well, if they want responsibility, they're going to want the money, so I can't give them that responsibility because then I'm going to have to pay them loads more and I can't afford to do that. But people do appreciate responsibility a lot more than what you realise, and not always expect such a higher... one thing I do now as well is I ask people if they're happy to disclose what salary they're on and what they're wanting, and quite often I found, especially apprentices that are wanting to move to get more experience, they don't actually want a pay rise, they just want... They're not getting the right experience where they are, they're not getting any experience where they are, or they just want, like you said before, experience doing something different, and it's not necessarily about the money. We've had people take pay cuts to come and get the experience and then progressed with us and got, you know, back onto higher salaries than they were on before they came to us. So I think appreciating that responsibility is a reward, not always financially, but just the actual...
There's perks that go along with it. You know, everybody wants to work less time. So, you know, what can we put in? What can we do to encourage them? Maybe showing the culture, like, you know, when you're at interview stage, or perhaps like, you know, you have a page set up to actually attract staff. It's talking about, well, what is the culture of your business? For us, we was committed to 5-star customer service, you know, which anybody that looked at the business could see, they're top dog in the area. We can see with all the reviews. But also, you know, the culture for us was about team bonding, going out once a month, trying to shut, it's heating industry, but trying to shut early on, once a month on Friday, and going out and having some beers. And now, there's a fine line between being too friendly with your staff and team bonding. It's something to be aware.
Yeah, I used to think that everybody wanted all the overtime and all the extra money, because when I first started, I would work 7 days a week, most evenings, quite happily. And my first qualified electrician wanted to work 6 days a week and most evenings and get all time and a half overtime. So when I was recruiting, I was like, well, we can offer you all this overtime that's paid at time and a half. And a lot of people were like, they just wanted to work Monday to Friday, 8 till 4:30, and enjoy the weekend. And it's like you say, what's your culture, your company culture? And we actually stopped doing 24-hour call out, because I recognised that when the first qualified electrician I'd taken on, when she left, she wanted to go do something with more responsibility, more office based, less on the tools, and the team that were left weren't really mad for overtime. They didn't want to work loads of evenings. They weren't bothered about not having a higher pay slip to not do on call, and like they were so much happier. But it was like you say, I just thought everybody wanted that because that's what I initially wanted, but actually, not everybody wants to work all these hours and have all this money and then no time to spend it.
Yeah, I think there is a different mentality, because you will have people coming through who maybe do have ambitions to start their own business, who do want, they want more, they want it faster, they will work for it, and there's other people who won't. So I think it's also possible to balance your culture and say that you can provide opportunities for, both different viewpoints there.
I think it's important to do that as well, because just because somebody likes to have a good work-life balance doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be a low performer, right? So you need to cater for both types, otherwise you as a business are going to end up missing out on some great talent.
And it's a mistake I see people making as well, is that your team are not going to care as much about the business as you as the business owner. You have to recognise that.
Of course,
and
they do.
But people do. People go into it, and you see it quite a lot.
They must do.
They
must believe it.
But they can really believe in it. But it's not going to be as much as you. And it's unfair to expect them to.
Luke, how much do you believe in Payaka?
Thanks, Tommy. Wholeheartedly.
Let's see your Payaka tattoo.
I think a lot of us have seen it. It's all over social media, but there's a big sort of thing about pranks on building sites in particular. Is that something that you've seen is part of the culture in your businesses, or what? If it is, what's the best or worst prank you've seen?
I'll say I've not really seen much, and I couldn't share it if I had seen it. Okay, but definitely banter. Definitely plenty of banter. It helps lift the team to have a giggle. But you do have to be careful of how much banter may the customer see. But pranks, I can't say any pranks.
Yeah, I don't think we've done much pranks. Obviously, with it being electrical, it's a bit
dangerous.
But obviously you see them, don't you, the videos and on the tools and stuff, and I think lads' banter is definitely different to women's banter. Our team, I've got a good sort of bond between them, and sometimes they'll say stuff jokingly, and like you say, you have to be careful what's said as a joke near to a customer or within earshot. One of them was really joking about electrocuting one of the other ones on purpose the other day, and I was like, this isn't funny. And they kept going with it to the point where I was like, seriously? And they were like, no, we're joking. And I was like, yeah, but it's not funny because the customer can hear you. But it's just remembering like you say, what's said in front of a customer and what's not. But I do think lads' humour is definitely a completely different kettle of fish.
We won't go there. Do you think there's a labour shortage in the trades?
Ooh, hot topic. Hot.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. I think there's definitely a job shortage to be able to create the staff, to make people who are qualified and experienced. You were saying earlier, wasn't you, about how it's the people in the businesses out there to create the jobs. But I think, yeah, definitely. And I've got a list of people with no experience or training who've come to us and said, please, can you help us get into industry? And I don't have the jobs for them, and they obviously don't have the jobs elsewhere to be able to get that. I don't think there's a shortage of willing or interested people.
There's not a shortage of people that want to do the work.
Yeah, it's just more weighing, I'd say.
I would say that there's also not a shortage of people with a piece of paper that says that they're qualified
definitely.
to do the work.
I agree with that.
What I think the major challenge to the industry is there's not enough businesses capable of supporting staff. If there were more businesses capable of supporting staff, then there would be more people looking for the job, rather than being forced down you will have to be self-employed. A little bit on your story there was you were kind of chose to go self-employed.
Yeah, like I had the idea I was going to be self-employed quite early on without really thinking about it. I just wanted to do what Ollie did, where he just went to work for people. Never really thought I'm going to be a self-employed business owner who's an electrician running. I saw what he did and was like, right, that's how I want to do it. I just kind of like, I never really I just envisaged where he goes and works for customers in their houses. That's what I want to be doing. But if I'd have not had that option with the domestic install scheme, I don't think I would have got into industry, because that was when I'd rang companies who were recruiting who wouldn't consider me, or I'd started working for somebody, casual labour, who wouldn't put me on an apprenticeship. So it was only because I paid for the qualification myself and got the experience and had the property that we were working on at the time. It was a very sort of good sequence of events and people that sort of lined up at the right time for me.
Yeah.
My sister's husband's wanting to retrain at the moment and looking into it, and he's like, so if I go do this course, and I'm like you say, yeah, you'll have a nice piece of paper from that. But
yeah,
but I think coming back to this, is there a skills shortage or is there a business shortage? There's not enough help out there for people to actually get their business off the ground. There's the vanilla stuff. The bank will give you some advice, GasSafe will give you some advice, I'm sure. NIC, EIC will give you some advice how to set up as an electrician. But it's vanilla. It's basic. It's not going to make the phone ring. It's basically, this is their viewpoint of how to set up in business. You need to get qualified, you need to get insured, and you need to have a van and tools, and that's it. Now off you go. Or here's a short course. Here's a 30-minute video about social media, and here's a 30-minute video about what you need on a website. That's it. Oh, by the way, our sponsor, Checkertrade. Maybe you should go on Checkertrade. And it's like, that is all that we need in order to have a successful business. So I think a lot of people believe that that's all what you need to get up and running, and come into the industry and find out that the phone's not ringing, which I think is what you said you struggled at first with.
Yeah, well, I was just a bit like, what do I do now? Like, I'd not really anticipated it being an issue. Ollie's got so many jobs through, like, ongoing work through people who he's played rugby with, he's grown up with, he's gone to school with. And I literally, I did not think more into it than, I'm just going to do what he's doing, but as an electrician instead. So then obviously I got where I was capable of going out and doing my own jobs, and I was like, and it was quite funny actually, because we'd talk about it and he'd say, oh yeah, well, Paul wants his house, that house he's doing, so-and-so wants this doing. So we had maybe like 5 biggish jobs in mind that his mates who needed doing, or people we knew, or our own job or whatever. But when it actually came to it, it'd be like, oh yeah, he's got someone else to do, right? And these people wouldn't have even questioned using Ollie, because that's who they used all the time. And I just expected that same reaction, but there was no reason for them, because they've got another Ollie who's an electrician, who's their friend from school or rugby or whatever. And I think where people do, or where women especially have struggled, is getting considered by those people. And luckily I went on social media, set up a Facebook page, and then went to some networking. And luckily, at that first networking meeting I ever went to, there was a branding company, and he straight away said to me, you need to brand as a female electrician. And that literally went from me not knowing what to do to get work, to setting up a Facebook page with that branding, messaging a few people who'd put posts up looking for electricians, to then being inundated with work because it was something different. I had a brand that people could recognise and straight away see, Little Miss Electrical, that's clearly a female electrician. And I did like some people have given me stick for it, but I did very much use that to my advantage, and it has like the branding company said to me, that you've got a USP there.
Absolutely.
But like if I hadn't have had that, I don't know where I would be now. I don't know if I would be in the same situation with the same number in my team. You know, that's definitely been.
Yeah. And I think like both of your angles are actually like the reason that you've been so successful. I think you've both gone into this understanding that you need to run a business. Like if you need help from people, you've gone out there, you found it, whether that's a networking meeting or you were sort of involved in like other sides, and other bits of business before, and you really recognised the business side of it. So even if you didn't have it at the start, you knew that you needed to learn that. Whereas I think a lot of people, the challenge is more that they went into doing a trade and then they were like, right, well, I just want to go out on my own. They've not thought of it of like, I'm starting a business now. I need to learn how to run a business. That's a completely separate thing from doing my trade. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. Like, how do you encourage that education around how you run that business?
I think the most important tool that most people underestimate is their computer. You need to understand how to use your computer to run the business. And how many tradespeople are just like, I don't do technology.
Yeah.
I don't do technology. All right, so you're qualified. Your phone's not going to ring. You know, your accounts aren't going to do themselves. The marketing's not going to happen on its own. You're not going to be able to write something for the next member of staff, giving them indication of this is how we want the job to run, because you're frightened of using the computer. Are
there any final tips you can give anyone on like motivating your team, managing your team, like incentives, anything that you do?
Do I have to say the ugly word? It's money for reviews. That I think encouraged the team to focus on customer first. Does it motivate them to stick around for forever? No, because not, as we've gone through, not everybody is motivated by the money. So the next point for me was, there's a clear channel to development here. You know, going from an apprentice or a trainee to an engineer. When you're an engineer, then you get the apprentice to go alongside you, and then there's a couple of people here that have shown, management skills or going into surveying, or perhaps you don't want to be an installer forever and you want to go out doing do the testing. How's about yourself?
Yeah, I think definitely listening to them. I originally thought money was like the main thing that would bother them, and like the first qualified electrician I took on, I set her wage at the highest what I think generally industry pay for a qualified electrician who's employed with all the tools and van provided to them, and found that it wasn't necessarily that was motivating. I think you've definitely got to listen to each individual. We do regular progress reviews and see what's bothering them, trying to be definitely be available to see. So like, say if they're struggling with something, they can come to you. I think trying to listen and keep involved with them, and so that you're there, you're not just an employer, but you've got an active role that they can speak to you. Like you said, development's definitely something that motivates some of them. Progression, getting more responsibility, which then leads to more money, which does then motivate them as well. Just I think it's different with everyone, but I think definitely having an open ear and listening to what they want in particular, without obviously going beyond what you're capable of providing. Having a good understanding between you both as to what you're capable of providing them with and what they're actually wanting from you.
That's it for this episode. I hope you found the information we shared useful. If you'd like any support on the topics covered, leave a comment below the video or head over to the Payaka website and we'd be happy to help. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the conversation, please support the channel by subscribing and liking the video.